Family lied to me. They canceled Christmas so that I wouldn't go. Then karma hit them hard. What if the people you trusted most, your own family, had been secretly stealing from you for years? Imagine working your entire life, believing you had nothing, only to find out your parents drained your inheritance and handed it to your golden child sibling. That's exactly what happened to me. But instead of staying silent, I did the unthinkable. I fought back. And when the truth came out, the consequences were devastating. Stay with me, because this story will shock you. You won't believe how it all ends. I always knew I was different from my family. Not in the rebellious black sheep kind of way, no, I had played by the rules my entire life. I worked hard, made smart choices, and built a career that anyone would be proud of. At 34, I was a financial lawyer, independent, successful, and self-sufficient. But somehow, none of that ever seemed to matter to the people who were supposed to love me the most. My parents, Richard and Evelyn, had always treated me like an afterthought, while my younger brother, Ethan, was the golden child. He could do no wrong in their eyes. It didn't matter how many times he failed, how many businesses he ran into the ground, or how many second chances they had to give him, he was always the priority. And me? I was just there, the responsible one, the stable one, the one they never had to worry about. I had spent years pretending it didn't bother me, swallowing the sting of being overlooked, telling myself that maybe deep down they loved me in their own way. I had long accepted that family gatherings meant Ethan taking center stage, while I was expected to be the one clearing the table or refilling drinks. I had made peace with it, or at least I thought I had until that Christmas. 3 days before Christmas Eve, my phone buzzed with a text from my mother. Bad news, sweetheart. The ice storm is hitting harder than expected. The roads are going to be awful, and we don't want anyone risking it. We're canceling dinner this year. Stay warm. We love you, I sighed, setting my phone down. A part of me was disappointed, but another part wasn't entirely surprised. It wasn't the first time plans had fallen through at the last minute. I poured myself a glass of wine, curled up on the couch, and told myself it was fine. I had a stack of legal briefs to review anyway, and if I was being honest, Christmas had never really been a magical time for me. It had always felt like an obligation rather than a celebration, a reminder that no matter how much I achieved, I would always be standing on the outside looking in. It wasn't until the next afternoon, when I mindlessly scrolled through my phone, that I felt the ground shift beneath me. There it was, an Instagram post, bright and festive, showing a beautifully decorated dining table with perfectly arranged place settings and a golden roasted turkey at the center. My entire family was there, grinning, laughing, drinks raised in a toast. My parents, my aunts and uncles, my cousins, and, of course, Ethan, sitting at the head of the table like a king. The caption read, "Best Christmas ever. So grateful for family traditions." I stared at the screen, my breath catching in my throat. My stomach twisted painfully as I scrolled through more pictures. My father carving the turkey, my mother smiling with a glass of wine in her hand, Ethan handing out presents to my little nieces and nephews. The house was glowing with twinkling lights, the tree overflowing with gifts, and through the large bay window behind them, I could see the sky clear, bright, untouched by any so-called ice storm. There had never been a storm. They had lied, deliberately. They had gone out of their way to make sure I wouldn't come. And not just that, they had built an entire lie around it, creating a perfect excuse to keep me away. How many times had they done this before? How many canceled events had actually happened without me? A memory surfaced, sharp and bitter, my mother telling me years ago that a family trip had been called off, only for me to later find out Ethan had gone anyway. The birthdays I had somehow missed. The family dinners I was never even told about. The Thanksgiving where I had spent hours helping my mother cook, only to hear her tell everyone later that Ethan had done everything. My fingers trembled as I clenched my phone tighter, my breath coming short and fast. It wasn't just neglect. It wasn't just oversight. This was intentional. A calculated effort to keep me at a distance while they carried on as if I didn't exist. Then, as if on cue, my phone buzzed again, a message from my mother. "Hi, honey. Hope you had a nice, quiet Christmas. We missed you. We missed you." I almost laughed. It was so casual, so dismissive, like throwing a bone to a stray dog. As if they hadn't just spent Christmas together without a second thought. As if I wouldn't see the photos. Did they think I was stupid? That I wouldn't notice? That I wouldn't put the pieces together? A slow, simmering rage started to build inside me, something I had never allowed myself to feel before. For years, I had brushed things off, told myself it wasn't a big deal, convinced myself that if I just worked harder, tried more, gave more, they would finally see me. But now, staring at the undeniable proof on my screen, something inside me cracked. I had spent my entire life trying to earn a place in a family that had never really wanted me there. I had given them grace, understanding, forgiveness, but they had never given me the same. They had taken my loyalty for granted, assuming I would always be there, always accepting the scraps they threw my way. Not this time. This time, I wasn't going to just let it go. This time, I was going to find out the truth. And when I did, they would regret ever thinking I wouldn't fight back. I sat there, staring at my phone, my mother's text glowing on the screen like some cruel joke. "We missed you." The words twisted in my stomach, tightening into something sharp and bitter. They had missed me. While sitting around that table, clinking glasses, laughing, exchanging gifts, while I was alone, sipping cheap wine on my couch, believing a lie. My entire body felt numb, my mind racing through every memory, every moment that suddenly felt like part of a much bigger picture. This wasn't just Christmas. This wasn't just a misunderstanding. This was a pattern, a deliberate, calculated decision to keep me on the outside, while pretending I was still part of their world. I set my phone down, pressing my hands against my temples, trying to think, why? That was the question clawing at my brain. Why go through the trouble of lying to me? Why not just be honest and tell me they didn't want me there? That would have been cruel, yes, but at least it would have been honest. But no, they had spun a lie, crafted an entire excuse, as if they were so used to doing it that it had become second nature. And that terrified me more than anything. How many times had this happened before? My heart pounded as memories surfaced, flooding my mind like a dam breaking loose. The time they had canceled a family vacation last minute, except, weeks later, I had seen a framed picture of Ethan on a beach in Mexico. My mother had laughed it off, saying, "Oh, it was a last-minute thing. You were so busy with school anyway." The Thanksgiving dinner I had been invited to, only to be told the night before that my father had the flu and they were postponing, except 2 days later, I saw pictures of them at Ethan's house, their plates piled high with food. The way I was always told after the fact, never during. They had been doing this for years. I stood up so fast my chair scraped against the hardwood floor. My chest felt tight, my hands shaking as I grabbed my laptop and sat back down. If they had been lying about this, what else had they been lying about? I pulled up my financial records, my fingers flying over the keys as I searched for something, anything, that might confirm the gnawing suspicion forming in the pit of my stomach. And then I saw it. My grandfather's trust fund. A trust fund I had always believed never existed. My grandfather had passed away when I was in college, and I remembered overhearing whispers about a fund he had left behind, something meant for my future. But when I had asked my parents about it, my mother had given me a sympathetic look, placing a gentle hand on my arm. "Sweetheart, your grandfather had the best intentions, but after his medical bills, there was nothing left. And like the naive, trusting daughter I had been, I had accepted it. Except that wasn't true. I clicked through account after account, my heart pounding in my ears. There it was, an account under my name, set up years ago. But the balance? Zero. The transaction history? Drained. And the withdrawals? They had started 10 years ago. The final transaction, a massive withdrawal, had gone directly into one of Ethan's failed businesses. My breath came short and fast, my hands shaking as I scrolled through the details. They had stolen from me, not just emotionally, not just through their dismissiveness or their lies. They had literally stolen from me. Hundreds of thousands of dollars gone. Money that was meant for my future, for my education, for my stability funneled straight into my brother's pockets. I slammed my laptop shut, my hands trembling with a fury I had never felt before. All those years I had struggled, believing I had nothing. The nights I had stayed up working until my eyes burned. The stress of student loans weighing on me like a boulder. The sacrifices I had made to get to where I was. All of it had been unnecessary. I had spent years killing myself to build a life from the ground up, while my parents had been sitting on a fortune that was rightfully mine. And worse, they had given it to Ethan. Of course they had. Of course he had been the one to benefit from it. I felt sick. My own parents had watched me struggle, had let me believe I had no safety net, had let me drown in stress and exhaustion, all while knowing they had taken what was mine and handed it over to my brother like it was nothing. And the worst part? They had never told me because they had never planned to. I sucked in a sharp breath, forcing myself to think logically, to control the rising wave of emotion threatening to consume me. They thought I would never find out. That was why they had lied about Christmas. That was why they had spent years keeping me at arm's length. Because the less involved I was, the less likely I would be to question things. Because if I never looked too closely, I would never see the truth. But I had seen it. And now I couldn't unsee it. I took a deep breath, gripping the edge of my desk, forcing my mind to slow down. Reacting emotionally wouldn't help me. If I confronted them now, they would gaslight me, twist the story, make it seem like I was the crazy one. No, I needed a plan. I needed proof. I needed to make them pay. I grabbed my phone, my pulse steadying as I scrolled through my contacts until I found the name I was looking for: Sarah Chen, a lawyer specializing in estate fraud. A friend from law school, a woman who had once told me, over drinks, the best revenge isn't yelling. It's taking everything they think they're entitled to. I hit dial. She picked up on the second ring. Lauren! Wow, it's been forever. What's up? I swallowed hard, my voice coming out calm, controlled. Sarah, I need your help. There was a pause. Then, with what? I took a deep breath, my grip tightening on my phone. My parents stole from me. Another pause. Then her tone sharpened. Tell me everything. And so I did. I laid it all out, every detail, every piece of evidence I had uncovered. My voice was steady, but inside I felt like I was on the edge of something irreversible. When I finished, there was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then, Sarah exhaled sharply. Lauren, this isn't just bad. This is criminal. You have enough here to press charges. I closed my eyes, inhaling deeply. I had known that, but hearing it from someone else made it real. I don't just want to take them to court, I said, my voice low, steady. I want to make them regret every single choice that led to this moment. There was a small chuckle on the other end. I was hoping you'd say that. A slow, icy calm settled over me. This wasn't just about confronting them. This wasn't about demanding an explanation. Because what excuse could ever justify this? No, this was about justice. And I was going to make sure they got exactly what they deserved. I had all the proof: bank statements, forged documents, every shady transaction laid out in black and white. But the real question was, what should I do next? Should I confront them directly and demand the truth? Or should I silently gather more evidence and take them down when they least expect it? Drop a 1 in the comments if you think I'll go for a heated confrontation, or a 2 if you think I'll play the long game. But trust me, you won't see what happens next coming. I spent the next few days in a haze, my mind consumed by every detail of what I had uncovered. Sleep was a joke. My appetite disappeared. I was running on caffeine, fury, and a determination so sharp it felt like steel in my veins. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw it: the trust fund, the withdrawals, the signatures that weren't mine. Every time I tried to focus on work, my thoughts drifted back to them, my parents, sitting at that dinner table, laughing, celebrating, as if they hadn't spent years robbing me blind. They had lied to me, stolen from me, and then discarded me like I was nothing more than an afterthought. Well, they had underestimated me. I had always been the quiet one, the responsible one, the daughter who never caused trouble. That was their mistake. Because while they had spent years believing I would never fight back, I had spent years learning how to win fights just like this. They had stolen from the wrong person. Sarah and I worked tirelessly, combing through every financial document, tracing every transaction. It didn't take long to see just how deep the betrayal went. My parents hadn't just dipped into my trust fund. They had bled it dry, and they had done it so carelessly. Transfers from my account to Ethan's failed business ventures. Payments toward my parents' mortgage. Lavish vacations labeled as family expenses that I had never even known about, let alone been invited to. And the worst part, they had done it legally, or at least they had thought they had. Sarah was relentless. They used a power of attorney you signed when you were 18, she told me over the phone, her voice laced with quiet fury. You probably thought it was standard medical paperwork. They used it to take control of your assets. I felt my stomach drop. Of course. I remembered that day so clearly now, my mother handing me a stack of papers, smiling, telling me it was just routine. We just need this in case of an emergency, sweetheart. Nothing to worry about. And I had trusted her. I had trusted them. That trust had cost me everything. I gripped my coffee mug, staring out the window of my apartment, watching the city lights flicker against the cold night. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw something, break something, do anything to release the fury boiling inside me. But I wouldn't give them that satisfaction. No, I was going to use every ounce of anger, every bit of betrayal, and turn it into something lethal. They thought they were smart, Sarah continued, her voice steady, but they were sloppy, too confident. The power of attorney they used, it expired when you turned 21. Every transaction after that was fraud. I exhaled slowly, the weight of her words sinking in. Fraud. Criminal activity. This wasn't just a civil case anymore. This was something bigger. Something that could ruin them. Good. Do we have enough to move forward? I asked, my voice eerily calm. Sarah didn't hesitate. We have more than enough. I nodded, my fingers tightening around my mug. Then let's move. She hesitated for a beat. Lauren, are you ready for this? I knew what she meant. She wasn't asking if I was legally prepared. She was asking if I was emotionally ready to go to war with my own family, to burn whatever bridge still existed between us, to become the villain in their story. I thought of every late night I had spent working, believing I had nothing, while my brother had blown through my inheritance like it was monopoly money. I thought of every moment I had been made to feel like I wasn't enough, like I didn't matter. I thought of that Christmas dinner, the way they had laughed, celebrated, knowing I wasn't there because of a lie they had created. And I thought of my mother's text, "We missed you." A slow, cold certainty settled in my chest. I was never part of their family to begin with, I said quietly. I have nothing left to lose. There was a pause on the other end. Then, Sarah exhaled. All right then, let's take them down. And just like that, the war began. I sat at my dining table, the weight of everything pressing down on me, as I stared at the neatly stacked folder of evidence in front of me. Bank statements, wire transfers, signatures that weren't mine, it was all there. A carefully constructed paper trail that led straight to my parents and Ethan. The more I looked at it, the angrier I became. Not just at them, but at myself. How had I been so blind? How had I spent years believing their lies, assuming that my struggles were just part of life? While they were siphoning off what was rightfully mine, I had been drowning in student debt, pulling all-nighters at the firm, while they had sat there and watched, knowing they had stolen my security, my future. And yet, they had never thought I would find out, never believed I would question. That was their fatal mistake. A knock at my door snapped me back to reality. I took a deep breath, smoothing my hands over my jeans before standing. I knew who it was. I had texted them hours ago. My message short and to the point. Be at my apartment at 7. We need to talk. No explanation, no pleasantries, just a demand. And now they were here. I opened the door, and there they stood, my parents, their expressions carefully neutral, and Ethan, looking as smug as ever. The sight of them made my stomach turn. My mother was the first to speak, her voice laced with forced warmth. Lauren, sweetheart, this is a surprise. What's going on? I stepped aside. Come in. They filed in, my father giving me a wary glance, my mother smiling like she was trying to smooth over whatever she assumed was bothering me. And Ethan. Well, Ethan strolled in like he owned the place, plopping himself down on my couch without a care in the world. I closed the door and turned to face them. This isn't a social visit, I said, my voice sharper than I intended. Sit down. My father's brows furrowed. Lauren, what's this about? I ignored him, moving to the table where the folder sat, flipping it open. My hands were steady, my voice even. I want you to explain this. I slid the papers across the table, watching as their eyes dropped to the documents. My mother reached for them first, her smile faltering as she scanned the pages. My father leaned in, his expression darkening. Ethan barely looked at them before scoffing. What the hell is this? He muttered. I folded my arms. That, I said, is proof that you stole from me, that you drained my trust fund, that you forged my signature to take control of money that was never yours to touch. I turned my gaze to my parents, watching as the color slowly drained from my mother's face. I want to hear you say it. My mother's lips parted, her eyes flicking toward my father, searching for an answer, a way out. My father exhaled heavily, rubbing a hand over his face before finally speaking. Lauren, listen, this isn't what you think. I let out a bitter laugh. Oh, then please, enlighten me. Because from where I'm standing, it looks exactly like what I think. Ethan leaned forward, rolling his eyes. Jesus, Lauren, don't be so dramatic. It's just money. You're fine, aren't you? You have a great job, a nice place. I slammed my hand on the table so hard that my mother jumped. That's not the point, Ethan. My voice was shaking now, my control slipping. I worked for everything I have because I thought I had to. I thought I was starting from nothing. I spent years struggling, while you were out there blowing through my inheritance, taking vacations, starting businesses you weren't even qualified to run. And you had the audacity to act like you were the one who had it rough? I turned back to my father, my voice dangerously low. You let me believe I was on my own, that I had no safety net, that I had to scrape and claw for everything while you handed Ethan my future on a silver platter. My father's jaw tightened. We did what we thought was best for the family. The family, I repeated, my voice hollow. You mean Ethan? Because let's be honest, you've never given a damn about what was best for me. My mother finally spoke, her voice trembling. Lauren, honey, we were going to tell you when. When there was nothing left? When you needed another bailout? I laughed coldly, shaking my head. No, you were never going to tell me. If I hadn't found out, you would have let me go the rest of my life believing there was never a trust fund to begin with. Silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. My mother's hands trembled as she reached for mine, but I pulled away before she could touch me. Lauren, please, she whispered. We're family. I stared at her, feeling nothing but a deep, numbing sense of finality. No, we're not. My father leaned forward, his voice low and sharp. What do you want, Lauren? I met his gaze without flinching. I want every penny back. I want a legal confession. And if you don't give me both, I press charges. Ethan shot up from the couch. You can't be serious. I turned to him slowly, My expression unreadable. Try me, Ethan scoffed, crossing his arms over his chest, like a petulant child. You're seriously threatening us? Over some money? Jesus, Lauren, grow up. I didn't even blink. $300,000 isn't some money. It was my future, and you stole it. My mother let out a shaky breath, reaching for my hand again, her eyes wet with unshed tears. Sweetheart, please, let's not do this. We're family. We can work this out. I pulled away, my voice cold and steady. Family doesn't steal. Family doesn't lie. And family sure as hell doesn't throw one of their own away like she's nothing. I turned back to my father, who had yet to say anything else, his expression stony. Do you even feel guilty? Or is this just another problem you need to handle before it messes up your perfect life? His jaw clenched. Lauren, this isn't helping anyone. Helping? I laughed, sharp and humorless. That's rich, coming from you. Where was this concern for helping when you were draining my trust fund? When you were handing Ethan check after check while I was busting my ass to make rent? Where was it when I was drowning in student loans? Working insane hours because I thought I had no safety net? I leaned in, my voice lowering. Oh, that's right, you didn't care. Because I wasn't Ethan. Ethan groaned, rubbing his hands down his face in exasperation. God, you're dramatic. It's money, Lauren. You're fine. You turned out fine. You have a nice place, a great job. Why does this even matter? My breath hitched in my throat, rage burning white hot in my chest. I had spent my entire life listening to Ethan talk like this, like the world owed him something, like consequences were just obstacles other people had to deal with. And my parents? They had enabled it every step of the way. You don't get it, I said, shaking my head. You never have, because you never had to fight for anything. You never had to earn anything. You had mom and dad cleaning up every mess you made, handing you everything on a silver platter while I was left to fend for myself. I turned to my parents, my voice trembling with fury. And you let him rob me blind. You let me believe I had nothing while you handed him everything. My father's face darkened, but he didn't deny it. He couldn't. The proof was sitting right there on the table between us. Ethan rolled his eyes. Okay, fine. So maybe they took some money. You're still acting like we murdered someone. Jesus, Lauren, you're a lawyer. Sue us if you're that mad. I smiled. Slow. Dangerous. Oh, I plan to. Ethan's cocky smirk faltered, his confidence slipping for the first time. My mother gasped, her face crumbling. Lauren, no. You can't. I arched a brow. Watch me. Silence filled the room, thick and suffocating. My mother's hands trembled as she clutched the table, her perfectly curated mask of warmth and patience slipping. My father exhaled sharply, rubbing a hand over his face like he was exhausted by all of this, as if I were the problem, not the years of deception and theft. Ethan, however, was still staring at me, his expression unreadable, like he was actually realizing, for the first time, that this wasn't a bluff. Lauren, my father finally said, his voice measured, controlled. You need to think about what you're doing. This isn't just about money. This is about family. I tilted my head. Funny. You didn't seem too concerned about family when you were forging my signature. His nostrils flared. You go through with this, and you'll ruin us. I smiled again. Then I guess you should have thought of that before you stole from me. My mother let out a sob, covering her mouth, shaking her head like I had just told her someone had died. Lauren, please. We can fix this. We don't have to go to court. We can figure something out. I studied her for a long moment, my heart hammering in my chest. She was desperate now, her voice trembling, her carefully composed image crumbling before my eyes. But the thing that stood out the most? She wasn't apologizing. Not once had she said she was sorry. Not once had she admitted what they had done was wrong. She just wanted to keep it quiet, to keep the world from knowing what they had done. And that's when I realized they weren't sorry at all. I straightened, my decision solidifying in my chest. "You have 48 hours," I said, my voice calm, firm. "Every penny plus interest in my account, and I want a signed confession." Ethan laughed, a sharp, incredulous sound. "You can't be serious." I didn't even look at him. I kept my gaze locked on my father. "Try me." More silence. My mother wiped at her face, turning to my father like he was supposed to fix this. But my father didn't say anything. He just stared at me, his expression unreadable, calculating, weighing his options. I didn't give him time to come up with an excuse. I walked to my door, yanked it open, and stepped aside. "We're done here." For a moment, no one moved. Then, finally, my father pushed back his chair, standing stiffly. My mother sniffled, hesitating, her eyes pleading with me one last time. But I didn't waver. I didn't cave the way I always had before. Ethan stood last, shaking his head, muttering, "Jesus Christ," under his breath as he shoved his hands in his pockets and stalked toward the door. One by one, they walked past me, stepping into the hall. My mother lingered for a second longer, her lips trembling. "Lauren," I met her gaze, unflinching. "Goodbye, Mom." She swallowed hard, nodded once, and then turned away. I didn't close the door until I heard the elevator ding at the end of the hall. And when I finally did, I let out a long, shaky breath, my hands trembling as I pressed them to my sides. I had done it. I had drawn the line. Now, all that was left was to see which side they chose. The next 48 hours crawled by at a pace that felt unbearable. I kept my phone within reach at all times, half expecting my parents to try some last-minute attempt at damage control, to bargain, to manipulate, to do something, but nothing came. No calls, no messages, just silence. It was the most telling response they could have given me. They weren't rushing to fix things, because they still believed they were untouchable, that they could ride this out, that I would cave the way I always had before. They had no idea who they were dealing with. By the time the deadline hit, I was sitting at my desk, staring at my empty bank account. No transfer, no confession, just proof that they had chosen their side and it wasn't mine. I let out a slow breath, my pulse steady. Fine, let them play it this way. I grabbed my phone and dialed Sarah. "They didn't pay," I said, skipping pleasantries. Sarah let out a low chuckle. "Of course they didn't. Did you really think they would?" "No," I admitted, "but I wanted to give them the chance." "Well, they blew it," she said, "and now it's our turn." The next hour was a blur of legal formalities, filing the suit, initiating the process of freezing their assets, ensuring every step was airtight. Sarah worked efficiently, her voice calm and clipped as she walked me through what would happen next. "They're not going to take this lying down," she warned. "Your father will lawyer up, your mother will play the victim, and Ethan, he'll try to turn it into a circus." I exhaled sharply. "I don't care." Sarah paused. "Lauren, listen to me. Once we do this, there's no going back." "Are you sure?" I thought of every sleepless night I had spent, believing I was barely scraping by. Every moment I had sacrificed to make a life for myself, while they had sat there watching, not struggling, not worrying because they had my money to cushion them. I thought of the Christmas they had spent laughing, drinking, celebrating, while I had sat alone, believing their lie. I clenched my jaw. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. Sarah's voice softened just slightly. "All right, then let's do this." And just like that, it was real. The fallout didn't take long to hit. Within hours, the calls started flooding in. My mother was first. "Lauren, please," she pleaded the second I picked up. "We didn't think you would actually do this." I scoffed. "Of course you didn't. That's the problem." Her breath hitched. "Sweetheart, we can fix this. There's no need to involve lawyers." I leaned back in my chair, keeping my voice calm. "Then you should have thought of that before you ignored my deadline." She hesitated. "We just needed more time." I cut her off. "You had 10 years. Time isn't the issue. Accountability is." Silence. Then, a sniffle. I don't understand how you can do this to your own parents. A slow, humorless laugh bubbled up in my chest. That's funny. I was just wondering the same thing about you. I hung up. Less than 10 minutes later, my father called. Unlike my mother, his tone was sharp, controlled. Lauren, you don't want to do this. I rolled my eyes. You don't get to tell me what I want, Dad. That ship sailed the moment you stole from me. His voice hardened. This lawsuit will ruin us. I arched a brow. Then maybe you should have thought of that before you committed fraud. A beat of silence. Then, low and furious, you have no idea what you've started. My grip tightened on the phone. Neither do you. I hung up. Then came Ethan. Unlike my parents, he didn't try to reason with me. He went straight for the attack. You're seriously doing this? He snapped. You're actually trying to destroy us over some money? I exhaled slowly, steadying my voice. I'm not destroying anything. I'm making sure you all finally face the consequences of your actions. He let out a sharp, bitter laugh. You're insane. You know that? No wonder no one actually likes you. You've always been a cold, selfish. I ended the call before he could finish. And then, for the first time in days, I let myself breathe. They had made their choice. Now they would live with it. I knew the storm was coming the moment I filed the lawsuit, but nothing could have prepared me for the sheer desperation that followed. It started small, frantic phone calls from my mother, long-winded voicemails filled with shaky-voiced pleas and carefully worded manipulation. Lauren, sweetheart, you don't have to do this. We're family. Let's talk, let's figure something out. I ignored them. Then came my father, his messages shorter, colder, the thinly veiled threats laced beneath his words. You're making a mistake. You need to reconsider what you're doing. Think about the consequences. As if I hadn't spent years dealing with the consequences of their choices. As if I was the one who had done something wrong. But Ethan? Ethan was different. He didn't beg, he didn't negotiate. He attacked. You think you're better than us? He sneered over the phone, his voice thick with anger. You're not. You're just a bitter little control freak who couldn't stand that I got something you didn't. Well, guess what, Lauren? You're not gonna win this. You think you can ruin us and walk away clean? Just wait. I hung up on him mid-sentence. I had expected all of it, the denial, the anger, the scrambling. What I hadn't expected was just how far they were willing to go to save themselves. Less than 24 hours after my father's last call, I got a notification from my bank. An attempted withdrawal. My heart slammed against my ribs as I read the message again, my stomach twisting into a tight, suffocating knot. They were trying to move what little money was left before the court order fully locked everything down. I grabbed my phone and dialed Sarah, my fingers trembling with fury. They're trying to move the money, I said the second she picked up. I know, she replied, calm as ever. We caught it in time. I let out a slow breath, pressing my fingers against my temple. They really thought they could get away with this. Sarah chuckled, but there was no humor in it. Of course they did. People like them always think they're untouchable until they're not, and they weren't. By the time the next court hearing rolled around, my father looked more exhausted than I'd ever seen him. My mother barely met my eyes. And Ethan? He had the audacity to still smirk at me, like this was all some game, like he still believed he could talk his way out of this. The judge didn't see it that way. Their accounts were frozen. Every dollar left was now out of their reach. My father tried to argue, tried to twist the narrative, but the evidence was undeniable. The trust fund records, the forged signatures, the fraudulent transactions. The judge barely let him finish before shutting him down. My mother wiped at her eyes with shaking hands. Ethan kept his arms crossed, jaw clenched, looking smaller than I had ever seen him. And my father? My father just sat there, staring at me like I was someone he didn't recognize. I didn't look away. This was the moment they had never expected. The moment they realized I wasn't backing down. I wasn't forgiving them. I wasn't going to be their quiet, obedient daughter anymore. I had spent my entire life trying to prove myself to them, trying to be enough. But now, I didn't need their approval. I didn't need their love. All I needed was justice. The moment the judge finalized the order, freezing what was left of their accounts, I felt something shift inside me, something sharp, something final. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was about control. And for the first time in my life, they didn't have it. I watched as my father clenched his jaw, his carefully maintained composure cracking under the weight of his own downfall. My mother, ever the performer, let out a quiet sob, her hands trembling in her lap as if she was the victim in all of this. And Ethan just sat there, his arms crossed, his expression tight, like a child throwing a silent tantrum. It was almost funny. Almost. Outside the courtroom, Sarah turned to me, her voice low. "They're going to fight this." I let out a slow breath, nodding. "I know." And they did. It didn't take long for the real battle to begin. My mother, true to form, took to social media first. Carefully worded posts about family betrayal, about how some people value money over blood. She never mentioned me by name, of course, but it didn't take a genius to read between the lines. Soon, the extended family group chat exploded. Cousins I hadn't spoken to in years suddenly had opinions. "Lauren, how could you do this to your own parents? They raised you, and this is how you repay them? Ethan made some mistakes, sure, but ruining your family over money?" I ignored them, every single one. Let them talk. Let them twist the story. The truth was on my side, and soon they would see it for themselves. Then came my father's move. He tried to petition the court to release some of the frozen funds, arguing that he needed them for essential expenses. The judge denied it. I almost laughed when I heard the news. He had spent years spending money that wasn't his, and now, for the first time, he was trapped. No access. No easy way out. And he hated it. Ethan, of course, was the most pathetic of them all. When the financial lifeline was cut off, he panicked. Without my parents funding his failures, he was forced to face reality, one he had never prepared for. I heard through a mutual connection that he had tried applying for a personal loan. Denied. His credit was shot, his businesses failing, and suddenly, for the first time in his entire life, he had to deal with actual consequences. I should have felt guilty. I should have felt something. But all I felt was satisfaction. And then, just when I thought they had run out of cards to play, my mother showed up at my apartment. I opened the door to find her standing there, eyes red-rimmed, her lips pressed together like she was barely holding herself together. "Lauren, please," she whispered. "Can we talk?" I didn't answer. I just stepped aside, letting her in, watching as she hesitated before finally walking inside. She turned to me, wringing her hands together, her voice trembling. "This has gone too far. You're tearing this family apart." I let out a slow breath, crossing my arms. "No, you tore this family apart. The moment you decided Ethan's failures were more important than my future." Her chin quivered. "We never meant to hurt you." I laughed. Sharp, cold. "You mean you never thought you'd get caught?" Her breath hitched, but she didn't deny it. She took a step forward, reaching for my hand like she had done so many times before, her eyes desperate. "Lauren, we're your parents. We love you. Please, drop this lawsuit. Let's figure this out together." I stared at her hand, at the nerve she had to stand here and ask me to save them. After everything, I met her gaze, my voice steady. "Did you ever stop to think about what would have happened to me if I never found out? Did you ever once feel guilty when you watched me struggle, knowing the money I thought never existed was keeping Ethan afloat?" Her silence was all the answer I needed. I stepped back, shaking my head. "It's over, Mom." Tears spilled over her cheeks. "Lauren, please, no." Her face crumpled, and for the first time, I saw it, the fear. Not fear of losing me. Not fear of losing her daughter. No, this was fear of losing everything. And it was well deserved. She wiped at her face, her breath shaky. "You'll regret this." I tilted my head. Funny. That's what Dad said too. She didn't say another word. She just turned and walked out, leaving behind nothing but the sound of my door clicking shut. And just like that, I knew they had lost. The moment my mother walked out of my apartment, I felt something shift inside me, something final, something irreversible. I had spent my entire life waiting for them to see me, to choose me, to treat me like I mattered. But in the end, I had been nothing more than a resource, a backup plan, a bank account they had drained dry without a second thought. And now they were paying for it. The lawsuit moved forward, and no amount of manipulation, no carefully crafted sob story, no desperate plea from my parents could stop it. My father's attempts to move money to outmaneuver me had all failed. My mother's attempts to rewrite history, to turn me into the villain, had fallen flat. And Ethan? He had stopped calling altogether. Maybe because he realized there was nothing left to take. The final hearing arrived faster than I expected. I walked into that courtroom with my head high, Sarah by my side, her confidence steady and unwavering. Across from me sat my parents, their faces drawn, their expressions tight. My mother refused to meet my eyes. My father sat stiff, hands clasped together like he was holding himself together by sheer will alone. And Ethan. Well, Ethan looked exactly like what he was, a man who had never had to face consequences before, who had spent his entire life being bailed out. But there was no bailout this time. The judge ruled in my favor, full restitution, every dollar they had stolen plus interest. I heard my mother let out a soft, broken sound, like she had been punched in the gut. My father's shoulder sagged, his face a mask of barely contained rage. Ethan just sat there, staring blankly, like he couldn't quite believe this was happening. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just stood there, feeling the weight of everything settle inside me. This wasn't about revenge. This wasn't about winning. This was about justice, about making sure they could never do this to me again. After the ruling, they tried one last time. My father cornered me in the hallway, his voice low and rough. "Lauren, be reasonable. You don't have to enforce this." I arched a brow. "You mean I could just let you keep the money you stole?" His eyes darkened. "You'll ruin us." I tilted my head, pretending to consider. "You should have thought of that before you decided my future was less important than Ethan's failures." His jaw clenched. "You're really willing to destroy your own family over this?" I let out a slow breath, meeting his gaze head-on. "You destroyed this family. I'm just making sure you face the consequences." My mother watched from a few feet away, silent, her face pale. She didn't beg this time. She didn't try to play the victim. Maybe because for the first time, she knew it wouldn't work. Ethan never spoke to me again. The next few months were surreal. The money was returned to me in increments, court-ordered payments that came with grudging efficiency. My parents had to sell property, liquidate assets, make real sacrifices for the first time in their lives. And I moved forward. I didn't look back. One evening, I sat on the balcony of my new apartment. The city spread out before me, lights flickering against the night sky. My phone buzzed beside me. A message from a cousin, one of the few who had supported me. "Saw the news. Guess you finally got the justice you deserved. Proud of you, Lauren." I smiled, setting the phone aside, feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. Because for the first time, I wasn't waiting for their love, their validation, their approval. I was free. And just like that, their empire crumbled. My father? Exposed for fraud. My mother? A social pariah. My brother? Forced to finally face reality without his safety net. And me? I walked away, free for the first time in my life. But here's the real question. Would you have done the same? Would you take your own family to court if they stole from you? Or would you let it go? Let's settle this comment. Yes if you'd fight back, or no if you'd let karma handle it. And don't forget, the truth always comes out. Trust is a luxury, not a guarantee, even with family. I learned the hard way that loyalty should never come at the cost of self-respect. In America, financial independence is everything. Read every document. Question every transaction. Protect your assets. Because no one, not even your parents, should have unchecked access to your future. If they betray that trust, don't hesitate to fight back. The law exists for a reason, use it. Never let guilt silence you. Never let manipulation trap you. And most importantly, never be afraid to walk away from those who would rather rob you than respect you.